All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to workshop 2 of the live event production challenge presented by myself, Jessie V. Castillo, pronoun she, her, hers, and Melania, who's here with me. Melania, you want to say hello real quick?
Yeah, I'm Melania, pronouns they, them.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this challenge, for joining this. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get to it. And I promise minimal dad jokes. So just to recap, what is this challenge? What are we doing? Who are we? We will be creating a live event production. And so this workshop is now broken into 2 parts. So before I get to that, the overall goal is to ideate, creative, direct, produce, and present a 30-minute showcase event, ideally at your school, featuring teen creatives in your school community. So just as a refresh, you can include music, dance, theater, improv, and comedy, and maybe any other genre that comes to mind that folks in your school community are talented at and want to showcase. So the goal for today's workshop is really to focus on what I call the fun stuff, the concept development and design, aka all the ideas. So in the last workshop that we had, we talked about just the challenge overall, and now we're getting into what does it mean to actually create an event. And that begins with, what even is the event? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? Who is in it? All of these like core concept points that we then turn into what I call the more intense part, which is the production, the promotion, and then the day of show. So to get into the event mission, sorry, one second. I'm actually going to pass it over to our co-teacher, Melania, to talk about mission and all that goes into that. So Melania, flow is yours.
Yeah, I think something really cool about the event mission is that if you're feeling kind of uninspired or not sure what to do, this is like the first step in like kind of being impassioned about this. So like, yeah, when you're planning this event, the first thing you want to address is like your event's tone. We're going to get into that. So your tone of voice or like what you're going to be transferring through this whole event. Second, a message. So yeah, basically like the ideology that's like driving this event and what makes your event like distinct or makes it as to like why people will go. So yeah. To kind of talk about tone, and it's mostly used in like writing, but it can be transferred to like any sort of medium where you're going to be expressing yourself or have some sort of voice in creating. And tone is the attitude your writing has. It could subtly mean more about who you are than the words you choose. And overall tone can really alter the mood of the whole event. So tone and mood are kind of different in that tone is your own attitude towards the event and it's your personal voice, while the mood is kind of the overall feeling and atmosphere the audience intakes. So while they're intrinsically connected, tone can really affect the way that people consume your event, whether it's, yeah, more formal or funnier or something of that sort. And a second really important thing to the whole event mission is message. So it's kind of like your driving ideology, something that probably inspires you or drives you in your everyday life and will help you, I guess, display this message even better to the people who come to the event. So yeah, you want your message to be authentic to you and also to connect to your target audiences, which in this case would be teenagers in your school community. This could be something as simple as like creating memorable moments and something just very personal to you, something just believing like, oh, I want my peers to have fun, or maybe you want it to be a little bit more distinct or personal to like your own positionality or something like that. But overall, I think the message is really important to kind of drive your determination for this event. Yeah, and lastly, there's uniqueness or kind of what makes this event distinct and why people would even be coming in the first place. So it's important for it to be like some sort of selling point, what makes your event quote unquote different. And it kind of drives also what the experience will be like at the event, knowing like, or thinking about what people will feel, see, or do at your event, how that how that differs from other events. Overall, just making it interesting and engaging. Yeah, so here are some like recaps of event missions and kind of like driving ideologies behind different events. One I'd like to point out, because I worked on this with other peers of mine, was Mocha Tea Night. And we kind of came up with the concept of rooted, because this was like our first teen night in person after the pandemic. So we thought that the concept of rooted was a really good way to kind of ground people and kind of be like a safe space after going through such like a tumultuous and like ever-changing year. So yeah, kind of in short, I'll bring up some important things that we said like in our event mission, such as the interactions with the outside world that create our unique identities, perspectives, and experiences which make us who we are. This means being rooted in community, society, and self. And we encouraged people to explore their own identities and find what roots them to who they are. So in all, we kind of took like our own experiences and the things we kind of went through in that past year and made that mission so we could all meet at a common ground as to what our event would look like, and also have like a personal drive to it. So yeah.
Thank you, Melania, for sharing all of that insight around creating event missions. Some of the other ones that you can see here, we just brought in a sampling of different types of events too, just to show how, in the example that Melania shared, where the mission is more so rooted around an experiential idea and ways to reconnect with each other, with the community. There's also other events that maybe like Desert Days and Outside Lands, which are just like straight music festivals. And there's still a story and a mission and a concept there. And you get to see the different ways in which people tell that. And the other example that you see here is TED Talk, which I know could be a running joke in certain spaces, but they really are super crafted at thinking about how do you tell a story concisely? How do you get people excited about a story? How do you share that story in a way that brings people together? So it's really cool to see all these different ways in which people share that. And so what I want to move into next is thinking about event goals. And so the mission is really like the heart and strings, the like fuzzies of the event is what I would call it, right? Like, what are we connecting to? And the goals are, what are we doing? Like, what is the purpose of what we're doing, and how are we going to measure what we're doing? And so as a part of this project, you're not required to submit any event goals. So really, we're just sharing this with you so you get to see the process of how other people move through these types of event projects. And so some of the core questions that I invite you to just think about and ask yourself are, why are you putting this on, besides the fact that it's a challenge? 2, why are you inviting people to this event? What are the key things you want your attendee to walk away with? Is it a certain feeling, as like Melania was talking about? Is it a certain thought? Is it, being exposed to something radically new? Is it a new community that they're going to be a part of? Like, what is that takeaway for them? And then the bigger one here is, how are you going to measure the success? And I think numbers, because measuring, tends to happen with like some type of scale. And so again, you will not be required to track any of this, but I do think it's an important thing to keep in mind. Like, are you measuring it by how many people are attending? Are you measuring it by like how many bands you're presenting that day? Are you measuring it by maybe how many people started following and commenting on social media and creating like a new community? Like, what is that target there, and how are you folding this into your overall goals? So with goals, what can happen sometimes is we can get really excited and we're like, oh, I want to do this, and then we're going to do that, and we're going to have 5 million people and raise $10 million, whatever, right? But as much as we want to have all the big ideas and dream big and dream large, we also want to make sure we're being realistic. And that's not to put anyone's ideas down, but it's a balance of being grounded, of like, what can we actually achieve in a way that is holistic, in a way that's mindful, in a way that respects everyone's time, because you've got, school things, friend things, family things, and whatnot, but still lets you dream big, still lets you reach for certain goals. So I put in a couple examples here of ways in which folks have created goals for other events that still dream big, but are also rooted, to borrow Melania's event title. And so one here says, host an event geared toward lifestyle related professionals with 4 main events every year and has an international audience. You're seeing 4 as a target number for the number of events, international for reach, toward lifestyle related professionals. So they're thinking about audience. So these are ways that you can start to break these things down. There's another one here, host events that could cater to a global audience. Again, thinking global, which in this day and age with the internet is very easy to do, while empowering attendees to network and take away meaningful connections with the event. So this is more so about relationships. They're measuring how many new relationships are being formed at this event. So there's some optional reading there. It's a blueprint to set event goals and objectives with examples, because examples are fun. So feel free to check that out if you'd like. But to keep us moving along, we are at the early stages of an event. And so what tends to happen when you're planning an event out is that you start the concepting, right? Like, what is it? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are we trying to do here? And at the same time, you're also doing what I call like resourcing. So you're starting to get some of those like foundational pieces in place. And so even though the next workshop will go deeper into this, I want to introduce it now, so that way you're starting to put these bigger or these more foundational pieces in place. So that way, when you reach the next workshop, you're not like, oh no, I didn't think about that. So some questions to reflect on, and these are also in the planning document, which you can see on the little QR code there on the bottom right-hand corner. Yes, I still do this because left and right. Bottom right-hand corner. So date, time, and location. Where on campus will it take place? What is the best time? Is it during nutrition? Is it during lunch? Does your school have 1 lunch or 2? So are you doing 2 events? Are you just doing A lunch or B lunch or what have you? For your budget, how are you going to get the materials that you need? Do you need a fundraise? Do you need to ask people for material donations? Who are those people that you're asking? These are things to start figuring out now. Because again, and going back to the like big ideas, like maybe you want to do really cool decor with like costumes and whatnot, but you got to find it, right? And so are you buying it? Are you asking people? Start to pull those questions and answers together. The last few here are planning team and volunteers, because events can't do them alone. So you definitely need a team. So who's going to help you? Who will help you set up the day of? Because that's really important. Who will help you promote? That's also a very special skill. And then lastly, who is your dream list of talent? Like, who would you absolutely love in your school community to perform at this event with you? Start to write all their names down. You're not going to showcase everybody, you have a 30-minute window. You could do multiple events if your heart calls you to it, but start to bring together who are those like dream people that you want to showcase, and then slowly bring that list down to a list of people who are able to perform at your event, are excited to perform at your event, and fit within the time that you have. So now to get into branding and creative direction, which is going to be the core focus of what we'll be doing today. We are starting to design the event, right? So what is event branding? I'm sure you've probably heard this word before. It's definitely gotten way more accessible in recent years, especially with like self-branding and like aesthetics and like Instagram pages and all of that stuff. And so just to give you the formal presentation of it, event branding, what it does is it unites the look and feel of your event with the story of your event. And the goal of event branding, to go back to goals, is to make sure that it's memorable, it's recognizable, and it's a unique experience. You want folks to look at your event and know, I know exactly what that event is. I know exactly what I'm going to feel or what I think I will feel when I get there. I know exactly what I'm walking into. That's what event branding creates. There's a lot of events, especially if you look at like festivals, who have really distinct aesthetics, and they've dialed that in to communicate a very specific story. So you can use branding to drive your promotions, to get your audience super excited and actually attend, which is the hardest part, and then make it easier for you to achieve your event goals, which we just talked about. So there's a couple of core components for event branding, and I'll just kind of list through them here. Your event name, what is it called? And the event name is a really big clue into what type of experience folks think they're going to be stepping into when they go to your event. Do you have an event logo or an icon? Is it a little graphic? Is it a smiley face? Is it a hand-drawn illustration? What is this identifier for your event that people will use to recognize your event and your event brand? Sometimes folks have an event slogan. So this could be like a short phrase that shares the essence of what your event brand is through a really simple message. So, excuse me. So to go back to like the example that Melania shared with their event, like they had the term rooted as the name of the event, but then they also had a couple of sentences that followed it afterwards that really tied people into this is what it is. The last two here, visuals, fonts, and color palettes. These are all the official looks and feels, right? What are these visual elements that are cueing people into your event aesthetic? And then lastly, which we just discussed with Melania, was the tone of voice. So this is all of the writing about your event, the way in which you're communicating it through your materials, through your branding, your graphics, etc. Like this is really what's kind of uniting it from a story standpoint. So here's a few examples of event brands that we pulled in here. Mocha Teen Night. There's one called We Rise LA, and they did a partnership event with self-help graphics and art. And this is a really interesting example because you're seeing two branded aesthetics come together to present one event, which is also really interesting to like just study. Desert Days, which is an event festival that's here in Southern California, and then Outside Lands, which is another festival that's located more in the Bay Area. So you can see that they all communicate completely different visual stories, but already give you a sense of the type of community maybe that you're going to connect with when you're there. So creative direction, all these words, what do they mean? So creative direction is basically the like planning part of branding. So if you think of branding as the story of your event, creative direction is how that story is consistently told. And the key word here is consistently, because sometimes what can happen is you'll maybe think of like, oh, that looks super cool. And then you make a brand new flyer and it looks maybe completely different than the one you just made for the same event. Now you don't have a consistent story. Now folks don't know exactly, wait, is this the same thing? Is it not? What am I going to? What's going on? So creative direction comes in to resolve that. So it's the process of turning this idea, which can be like the looks and feels and whatnot, into tangible, consistent reality. So this is through the logos, the visual content, the social media, the posters, the flyers, the writing, making sure that that branding is, again, consistently told. So what's really cool is that if you have someone on your team, or maybe you are that person who really likes to think about how you tell a story from beginning to end through the visuals and through the writing, this might be a spot that you'll have a lot of like fun with and really seeing the whole way through. Actually, sorry, let me go back to that. And then I wanted to touch, Melania wanted to share some thoughts here about talking to friends who could support you in the creative direction process. So Melania, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think a really cool and interesting way to kind of be collaborative in the creative direction process is kind of knowing like your own strengths and weaknesses and knowing others' strengths and weaknesses. So a lot of the times, like when I would work with a lot of my like close friends who I was like, oh, I know this friend of mine is really into graphic design or really into art or has been wanting to do something similar in like event advertisement or just making art for an event and for the event to like be to look nice and all that. I think a really cool way to kind of lead this creative direction is literally just asking friends that you know who might be really good at one thing and you're like, oh, I love the way you do this. Do you want to work together? And I think that's just really important to kind of expand your ability to like collaborate with others and also like kind of create a more like communal sense of creative direction. And yeah, I really kind of like going this way about creative direction and kind of adhering to your own strengths and recognizing the strengths in other people.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate, Melania, like the way in which you touched about really leaning into the collaborative process, because again, events overall is really collaborative. Or I think it's at its best when it is that. Something that I like to share is like, you won't have every best idea when you're in a team setting, but someone else will. And it's always fun discovering that together. You know, you're just throwing ideas at a wall, like maybe this and then maybe that. And then folks just kind of like keep building upon that until you arrive at whatever it is that you end up making. So yeah, thank you for that. So as a reminder for this particular project, you will be creative directing, or someone within your team will be, a couple of core assets that you will be uploading at the end of this challenge. So I have them highlighted here. You will be making one save the date flyer, which is a flyer that announces just the event. So it's like the date, the location, and like maybe what time it is, and you know, your byline or your slogan or whatnot. You can add more information to it if you have it confirmed. But if you don't, it's fine. The save the date just lets people know, hey, this is happening. I'll tell you more later. That's basically the tone of it. The talent lineup flyer is the next one that you'll be making. And that flyer announces who your event performers are. So you've likely seen lineup posters from like, again, like festivals, concerts, like local shows, DIY shows, things like that. And these are really important because you want to highlight your talent. You want to make them center stage, literally, and celebrate them. And so this is a really important one to have. The last one here, this one you won't really be creating a flyer for, but since you are designing it as a video, you know, you want to be consistent with like maybe what font you choose on TikTok, or if you do a color overlay, which color you're picking, things like that. But the recap video will be highlighting special moments that happened during the event. So this is something that we'll go into deeper a little bit later, but essentially when you're making your recap video, just keep in mind that you want it to match the rest of your event branding and creative direction. And then there's an optional one here. This is a bonus, but not required. You can also make individual talent flyers. The reason it says 3 times, because we're guessing, though again, you're not limited to it, that you would have at least 3 performers in your showcase. And if you choose to do the individual talent flyers, these are separate flyers per talent that highlights their performance at the event. So think back to like, you know, perhaps like a festival where there's like 20 people on the lineup. Sometimes what folks will do is make just one flyer saying like, and then it's this artist, and then the next day, and then it's this artist, and then the next day, and then it's this person, and so on. So these are really nice to have separate from the talent lineup because it makes people stand out a little bit more. It gives them like a special position and a special shout out instead of the talent lineup where it might just be a bunch of folks' names in one flyer. So again, it's a bonus, not required, but if you choose to do it, have fun. So part of the materials that we've shared with you are, there's one called a flyers copy doc. So copy is a word that we went over just recently around all the writing that goes into all of the designed and shared things. And so we made a document template for you to use to place all of your copy that are going for designed elements. So you can scan this QR code here and it'll take you straight there. And I'll show you the document in a second. But some things that I want to highlight as you're working through the document is you want to make sure for your flyers that is it easy to read on your phone? Is it clear what the event is about? And is it exciting? Is it fun? Is it capturing people's attention? I like to do what I call like the phone test, which is when you make a flyer, you design it, save it to your computer or your phone or wherever, but then actually open it on your phone and look at it in the size of your actual phone frame. Because that'll tell you right away whether or not it's easy to read. That'll tell you right away whether you know if it's clear what this thing is. And then when you're looking at it so small and you just get a little glimpse, it'll tell you like, oh, this is actually capturing my attention. You can share it with friends. Is it getting them excited? Do they still have questions? Like, this is a great way to start testing before you officially publish it anywhere. Because once it's out, it's out. So the flyers copy doc here is what it looks like here. So this is the Google document, and you can make a copy of it. And so in here, we just included a note here to please remember to name your file like that. So school name, one word, underscore project title, underscore year. And the reason we do that is so that way for all of the lovely folks who are part of this challenge, can properly organize and save all of these files that are coming in. So let's make life easy for everyone. Please remember to name your file. So down here, you can see the flyer type, save the date flyer. We dropped in just some inspiration. You don't have to use that as your inspiration. We just wanted to show you an example. The size, this is in pixels. If you maybe haven't heard of the term pixels before, it's basically the unit of measurement for visual things on a screen. So like printers use dots per inch. So it's like the actual dot on a sheet of paper per inch. Pixels are like the same concept, but on a screen. So that's the pixel dimension for an Instagram portrait. And then we also typed it in here, Instagram portrait, because you'll be using Canva, so you can just search it. Assign to is a really great field because, again, like maybe with Melania, and let's say you bring someone in to work with you to create the flyer, you want to make sure who you want to keep track of who's the person that's doing that. So you could pop in their name there. And then here's where you can actually update the copy, aka the writing, for what's supposed to go on this flyer. And then lastly, the link to it, because we want to make sure everything's easy to find and organized. So once you've made your flyer, you can drop in the link there and then share it with everyone who's on your team and everyone who's helping you promote. So it's all in one nice location. So here's the talent lineup. Again, you would switch this out with whatever your performer names are. And then here's a placeholder for the bonus individual flyers if you choose to do that. So moving into Canva, how do we Canva? If you've never used Canva before, I have good news for you. It's very easy to use, or at least it makes it as easy to use as they could possibly make designing on the internet to be, which is great because design tools can sometimes look a little overwhelming. So I'll show you how to do this in just a second, but just to talk through it, you will either create an account or log into an existing Canva account. It's whichever one you have access to. And then from your dashboard, you're going to click create a design, which is the giant purple button on the right-hand side. You'll either search or just scroll down to where it says Instagram post portrait and select that option. And then you're going to name your file because we love organization. And that's how you'll name it. So the example that I included down here is LA High School _ locals only lunch _ 2022. So this is all made up. I don't think there's an actual high school, LA High School exactly. There's lots of, anyways, so this is made up. This is a fictional idea. So I went ahead and this is my Canva, ta-da. It says, thanks for being 1 million, that's great. So this is where you would go to create a design. So to click, and then you can see Instagram post portrait is already in my suggested, but if you don't see it there, just keep scrolling. Or again, oops, let me type Instagram post, or you can search and then it'll come up there. And what's nice is it'll tell you the pixels up here. So just in case you're not sure if you're clicking on the right one, you can double check it with the Flyers copy doc that you're selecting the correct one. So I actually already made a flyer. So I'm going to scroll down here and click on it. And this is, oh, I wanted to open the file itself. Let's see. Oh no. This is my failed demo. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to make a copy. Nope. Okay. Let me move out of this window and I will fix it in 1 second. Yes, let's see. So in the meantime, I'm going to pop over to this next slide over here while I live troubleshoot. Okay, so what your flyer should have is the title, the subtitle, the date and time, the location name and address, as well as your talent lineup flyer, which is the talent names. And then optional, you can make a social media handle for the event, and that's what you can drop in at the bottom there. Perfect, I fixed it. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this back. Great, okay, we're back in Canva. So here's the example that I made. This is not real, it's not a real event or a real flyer for anything. But you can see up here, let me just fix the file name. Perfect, we love organization. So this is what the interface looks like here. And so you'll see here on the far left-hand side, there's templates, elements, uploads, text, projects, and apps. You can pretty much ignore those last two, projects and apps, and then we're gonna hang out mostly in the first three. So what's nice is that Canva has 1,000,001 templates. And so if, maybe you are not strong in design, maybe there's folks in your community that don't feel as confident, don't worry, you can search through millions of templates and still create something that's really cool and representative of your event. But if you have folks in your community, who are talented in this, you can lean on their expertise instead. So you can search through here to find a bunch of different options for, like, here's this grand opening one, a flash sale, whatever, and use those elements to design your own flyer. The elements section here, so you can see there's options here. These are some of the ones that I used. Is grouped by a couple different core sections. So there's lines and shapes. So if you click see all, you'll see that there's a bunch of options here that you can use. There's graphics, and you can search for 1,000,001 different graphics. Maybe I want this green wavy thing in there, who knows? There's stickers that are more animated, which you can throw in. There's stock photography. There's videos even, and then you can really go in on like charts and tables. Frames is something that's really interesting, and I'm going to open up a new one here just to show you what it does. So frames, is basically a photo frame that you would drop your image into. So for example, if you choose to do the featured talent flyer, where you have one person's photo in here, you could drop in a frame like this, and then just to fully demonstrate it, I'm going to just search for, let's drop in this dog. This dog's performing at my concert. So we're going to drop in this dog, and all you do is you click, drag, and then once you see it hover into the frame, you can drop your image in, and now you have your featured person's portrait, for example, in there. If you're uploading an image of someone, that's where you would go to uploads over here and search for the image that you're looking for. So for example, if there's a band that you're featuring and they have a band photo already, you can go to uploads, upload it, and then click and drag it in. The way some of these other editing tools work is that you actually just kind of hover over the section that you want to edit, and you'll see it turn purple. And then the editable features will show up. So for example, this is now highlighted purple, so it tells me that I can edit it. So I'm going to click on this blue here, and now I can choose a bunch of different colors to change the background, for example. So I'm going to make a duplicate because I don't want to destroy my work here. So like, let's say we don't like this blue, the blue's too much, I don't know, and we want to do purple. I can click on that purple and now it will change it to match that. Or let's say I want to drop in, this is what I was playing with earlier, like let's say I want to drop in a really funky gradient. I'm going to click, drag, hover, and then it'll just drop it into that background. And now I have this really cool, funky gradient situation going on. And you can keep playing around until you find, you know, these are actual ones that I was playing with, until you find examples or elements, graphics, or whatever that work best to tell your event story. Now, something is coming up here that I really want to point out, which is for my flyer, you can see that some of these red circles are starting to vanish. Now, there's a rule when you're designing anything that's visual is that you want to make sure that it's accessible. And accessible means a lot of things depending in which context you're talking about it. This context in particular is around reading accessibility. So we want to make sure that people can still read this. And there's two things that you want to look out for as like your like number one, number two concerns: contrast. And then I literally just forgot the second one. Okay, it is contrast, and then you're looking out for color blindness. That's what it was. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of folks who actually have varying degrees of color blindness. So you don't want to have colors that are too close to each other that folks might not be able to distinguish the difference. So here, for the most part, it looks kind of okay. The concern that I have when I look at it now is that this green is really, really close to some of these background colors, which makes it hard to read. And now my red smiley faces are also blending into the background, which could either be an intentional design choice or a really hard to read design choice. Let's say for the sake of the argument, I want people to really see these circles. I'm going to turn them all into this green color here so we can see them better. I'll just click change all. And then now we have our updated greens. And then this text here, let's make it white. So you can see that I'm just clicking on the A here and then choosing a new color to make it more legible. And you can keep playing around with this until you find a color palette that works better for your particular event. And the way that you can edit your text is you can hover over here and then click to activate it, which is when it turns purple, and then click in to edit. And so now you can see that my text is highlighted and I can hover and type in anything I want like that. And then you can add as many spaces as you want, etc. You can change the size of it. So what I did here is I highlighted everything, which is Command A on Mac. On PC, I believe it's Control A, but feel free to double check on the internet. So anyways, I hit Command A to select it all. Here's how you can change the font size. So right now it's at 32. Let's say I want it to be bigger because that's the only text in there. So I could make it 48. And then I'm just going to drop this line down just to space it out kind of nice. And there you go. You have your type adjusted. And then if you click on it, you can also move it around. So if I click and hold, then I can drag it around. And then, you know, now it's telling me it's evenly spaced between the smiley faces and it's in the center because you see the little purple line in the middle. You can also spin it. So this little twirling thing here, if you hover and then click, I can turn my text all kinds of directions. And then the degrees down there tell you if it's 0, it's at perfectly horizontal. And then if it's at 90, it's at perfectly vertical. So for those of you who are like geometry fanatics, you're going to get a huge kick out of this. But that's pretty much how you edit and adjust your text. If you want to change the font, so you can click on it again, click down on where it says here, I can't pronounce that, Bernoru expanded. But if you click down, you can search for any font in here that's in Canva. So you can really spend your time looking through this to find one that best communicates your event brand. So, you know, you can work with friends on this, you can collaborate, or maybe there's one that you already have in mind. But there's quite a few funky options in here, so you can definitely play around with that. Now, one thing I want to point out is because I picked, like, let's say we're going to use this shorthand font, there's a giant space between the sentences. And so if you want to keep that, you can, but if you want to adjust it, the way to do it is you go over here where it says spacing. You're going to click on that, and then line spacing is what adjusts that space. And you can drag it down to make it sit tighter together. Or let's say you really like that and you want to drag it even further away. You can go all the way up until about 2.5 point. So feel free to play with that to find a spacing that you think works better for your design. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this background because the contrast is a little rough for me. I'm going to bring back my blue. But that's how you can play with these things and move them around. You want to make sure that all of your information is up to date. So it's definitely good to have other folks look at this with you. And then you can also make a lot of different versions. So if you can see up here, let me zoom in a little bit. I actually name it. So if you hover up here, this one says save the date. This one, I need to rename it. So we'll just say save the date flyer, and then I'll say version 2 because I'm experimenting. Here's talent flyer, which I just destroyed. So let's fix that. Because look at that, you can't read anything. So I'm going to bring that red back. Perfect. So this is now our talent flyer. And then here we can say talent flyer per artist. And then we can also change that back to red for now. And this is potentially where that flyer can be. And so what's nice is that it all lives in one file. You don't have to worry about multiple files. And then once you're done, you've looked this over, everyone's looked over this with you, all the information is 100% correct. It has your location, your time, your address, your public facing, not personal Instagram or TikTok account, things like that in here. You can go ahead and click share up here. And then this is where you can go to download them. So if you go to download here, you'll see that it already kind of like sets up a couple options for you. So you're going to keep PNG. And to quickly explain what PNG is, it's basically like a JPEG, but way more compressed, which makes it very easy to share on the internet and social media. So we like PNG, and that's why it's suggested. The size, we're not changing it because that's the exact size that we want. And then you can select which ones you want to download. So let's say you're using all of these. Then you can select all pages up here. It's already pre-selected that way. Or let's say you made a brand new flyer halfway through your planning process and you only want to download that one flyer. You can unselect it up here, which is what I did, and then scroll down to download the flyer that you want. So in this case, let's just say it's my talent flyer. You could save your download settings if you'd like, and then click download and choose where in your computer you save it to. So that's how you essentially work within Canva. One other thing that I want to note here that's really important from a visual standpoint is that you want to make sure you have hierarchy. So what I mean by hierarchy is you want to make sure that it's really easy for someone to read through the flyer in a way that's clear, concise, and tells them what's the most important piece of information. So for example, here, the way I demonstrated hierarchy is first and foremost, the name of it, the name of the event, what it's about, and then all of the details at the bottom. That is just one approach. There's many different ways that you can do hierarchy. Some folks put all the date and time information up here, and then the title and the description in the middle. Some folks flip it all kinds of directions, but you just want to make sure that it's really clear that not everything is the same font size, because then there's no longer any visual hierarchy. And then folks, like, your eye isn't going to know where to go. So something that I like to remind folks is that we read in an American context, which is primarily English. And so that means that people read from left to right and then top down. And so when you're presenting visual information, you want to keep that in mind and design in a way that naturally matches that pattern for folks, because that's going to be the easiest way for them to read through your flyer. So in coming back over here, You click on our next slide. So once you've made all your flyers and you have them all, you've shared them with your friends, you want to think really deeply about your distribution strategy, which is basically where are all these flyers going to go? How are you going to send them out? What apps are you using? Are you printing any of them? Are you turning things into stickers or buttons? Is there anything else that you want to make, like postcards or flyers or posters or signs? What is a part of this branding and communication strategy to tell people that your event is happening? So there's many different ways that you can do it. The only ones that are absolutely required for the challenge is Instagram or TikTok, doesn't have to be both, but one or the other for posting about the event promotion and then the recaps. So for Instagram, you could use posts, stories, or reels. For TikTok, it's just the videos. But maybe you want to integrate other options too. Like, for example, you could use Be Real and use it as a tool to promote behind the scenes, or like maybe teasers or sneak peeks or things like that as you lead up to your event. And then you could also do physical and in-person distribution strategies like direct invites. Like, folks always love a direct invite of like, hey, I really would love for you to come to my event. Like, it makes people feel special. It makes people feel welcomed and celebrated in this space. So for direct invites, you could call people, you could send them text messages, you could send them DMs. If you're on Discord channels or threads, you could throw that in there as a way to get more folks engaged into your event. Again, you could do printed options like posters or signs of the flyers that you made. You could do postcards, and then you could also do stickers or buttons. So again, definitely think of the dreaming big, but then also staying grounded and using the tools that you already have, the tools that your community and your team is very strong in, right? Like, you don't want to send someone to like, for example, to start texting or DMing a lot of people and they're like an introvert and that's their least favorite thing to do. You want to think about how can you leverage people's existing skill sets and get folks excited, get folks engaged in your event. So some final things to remember is people will forget. They will forget. There's so much happening in the world. There's so many events and things online and whatnot. And, you know, folks will forget that your event is happening. So plan to send out reminders or reposts or restory shares or what have you for every single flyer or promotional thing that you post. This is really important. There's a lot of ways in which people strategize around this. One quick tip is, I would say, boost, aka do more reminders the week of your event before your event day. So that way it's fresh in people's minds. You also want to tag folks. You want to tag the talent and any key supporters that are a part of your event, such as your school, your arts club, etc. So that way they can share it to their accounts too. And then I highly recommend mixing it up. So you could share behind the scenes photos, talent photos, headshots, and any other images that will get people excited about your event. People really love behind the scenes stuff just because it makes them feel like they're there. It gives them like a more real story of what's happening in the lead up to the event, and it's a lot of fun. So try and share that if you can. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that your written copy, so the captions, the writing on the flyers, and anywhere else you could possibly have writing about this event, that it's 100% consistent, because you don't want to give out the wrong information through 4 different channels. You're going to have a lot of confusion. So eye exhaustion is very real. You know, you're just like, I can't look at this anymore, and you stop reading deeply. And so this is where you tap into your team, you tap into your friends and your family to help you double check for typos and for outdated info and etc. It's always, always better to ask for help. And this is where team can come in to really make sure that everything from head to toe, all your flyers, all your content is 100% good to go. So that brings us pretty much to a close. But before I officially wrap it up, are there any final thoughts, Melania, that you would like to share?
I would just probably echo everything that Jesse said, and then also emphasize just the importance of collaboration. I think this all takes, like, just by seeing like the amount of different I guess like skills, or not necessarily skills, but amount of different efforts that are needed to put the whole event together is really important, from like the creative direction to the driving ideologies, and even like using something like Canva and like finding ways to like distribute this in creative ways. So yeah, I think it's really collaborative, and I think your best way of going about it is just making sure you're working well with the people around you, and finding ways around challenges.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Melania. And thank you all for joining. I'm really excited to see all the flyers that y'all make, the way in which you interpret your brand into a creative direction strategy, and then how it folds into the event itself. So yeah, if you have any questions, you have your teachers to support you. So definitely connect with them. You have access to these slides and this video, and then all of the resources are online in the Google Drive folders that have been shared with you. So feel free to dig through those, and hopefully they have everything you need to get you through this first part of the phase. So enjoy. Thanks, everyone.